For today's ordeal subject, I want to talk about the Heart Clan Massacre. Okay, now there's a very specific aspect of it I want to talk about, and I don't remember which stream I brought it up in, but I know I mentioned that I think it would be a really good idea if the Gakki, when they were younger, to be present during the Heart Clan Massacre. Especially since we don't know how old they actually are, but they don't look that much, like they don't look too far off from what the god tier should be in age. You know, maybe like anywhere from like 5 to 10 years, right? Which should realistically be okay for the timeline. Especially if we look at somebody like the Beast Gakki, or the only one who wouldn't really fit is obviously Kirito because he's really young, but everybody else should be about a proper age to like be, you know, present as a child or like as a teenager during that time, right? So I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about it basically before the season comes back, which is why I'm talking about it right here. Again, I brought it up in a different stream. I just don't know which stream, and since I don't know which stream it is, I can't basically officially confirm where and when I've said it to make that specific section into a video, which is what I'm doing with this stream instead, right? So that the idea can be more properly established, properly looked at, and you guys can have your inputs placed into the video as well for other people to look at and comment on, right? Now, with the Heart Clan Massacre, it's one of the bigger events in Ordeal as a whole. The strongest clan was literally wiped out in seemingly one night. We don't know a lot of context, but I feel like the way it's been alluded to, it just kind of happened in a single 24-hour session at max, right? Like it shouldn't have extended past like a single day. So basically, Vaal, Kagaya, and who knows who was there to destroy the clan. Now, considering the fact that Sabito did destroy Thanatos' army, it kind of makes you wonder who else they all had on standby to even help him eradicate the clan, because and I'll get into this a little bit later, if Masato is still alive in current time, that means he was still alive during the massacre, which means it's more than likely possible that only Kagaya and Vaal would have been the ones to fight Masato, but Masato is leagues above Kagaya most likely, and with that being said, it only makes sense for somebody like Vaal to fight Masato, especially because they both have forbidden talents, and them having forbidden talents shows that they are a lot stronger than even a higher ranking Kimyo would be naturally, right? Because their talents likely have certain attributes that lead to, you know, not just higher power, but, you know, some sort of drawbacks or something that makes them a little bit more dangerous in the long run, right? Like especially with like Vaal, who we know is effectively immortal because of all his blood, and he can absorb chi and things like that, right? But we don't know why exactly Masato and the Eye of Time is seen as forbidden, right? But with that being said, it only makes sense for Vaal to have fought Masato during the massacre. But that leaves the rest of the clan at Kaguya's mercy, which is kind of fine. If that were to happen, it makes sense. But in my opinion, it would be a lot more interesting if the Gakki as kids or teenagers were present during that time. This gives it a chance for them as characters to be explored in very minor but like impactful ways, right? I think out of all the Gakki we've seen, I'd say about 4 should be there consistently. You can do 5 if you want to add Goro, but I think for the most part, the ones that we've seen, there should only be 4 consistent people in this sort of like flashback that we potentially, hopefully, may see. And those Gakki would be Meledan, the most likely candidate for the Poison Gakki, the Beast Gakki, as well as Roberto, the Fox Gakki, and Ariel, the Faces Gakki. Now, I have a sort of specific reason for all of them being there, mostly because they have some of the more clearer character aspects that we've seen across any of the Gakki out of the entire list. Not to mention we haven't even seen 3 of their designs definitively, and somebody like Goro was sealed, and Konos, I mean, he could be there, but like it feels like a waste to put him there. And then of course Kirito should just be too young for that sort of thing to occur, unless there is something else in the season that will explain why he either was there or, you know, why he wasn't there, right? Depending on if we even look at the massacre in season 4 as a whole, which I'm hoping at least we do, because I feel like by the time season 5 rolls around, it'll be a question people will have, but I feel like at that point it won't be fully necessary or won't fit with the context of whatever, you know, the season will have going on, right? course, Vaal says, "Enough, my children." This context right here, where he says "my children," along with the Beast Gakki calling Vaal father, should genuinely lead to the Gakki as a whole not only seeing Vaal as their father in a very legitimate sense, but should also mean that they have been around him since they were young enough to consider him a father, right? In the same way that Leo would see, or I mean, Shay would see Leo as a father, right? It just makes sense, right? But also, the Gakki being present at the Heart Clan Massacre not only does something for them as characters and individuals, but also looks at Vaal and his sort of system as a whole, because it's literally Vaal and the Gakki doing to the Heart Clan exactly what Verdun and his company did to Vaal's village and his family, right? It would be a very good contrast, and to show that Vaal is literally repeating a cycle, right? While also creating his own family, something he wanted to do, like what his father did, right? So, and I know I mentioned that in a review. I don't remember which review it is, that Vaal literally created his own family, something that his father wanted to do. So he achieved his father's goal, but for a more negative purpose. But this concept would add to Vaal's character and would allow for that sort of mirrored depth, essentially. The reason I think somebody like Meledan, Roberto, and Ariel should be there is because of how they interact in episode 112, which I will put on the screen. So we have Meledan here. This is right after 111, where Roberto and Ariel flee when Ian uses the life serum and almost booms the niggas, right? So he says, "Ha ha ha, did you really just turn your 9 tails and run from a fight, Roberto? Protecting that pathetic girl of yours has made you soft." And then, of course, he responds, "You really want to eat your own mask that badly, Meledan? I'm still prepared to shift, shall we?" I think these two being present at the massacre, and we see them facing, you know, even stronger Heart Clan Kimyos and just really skilled humans, being able to slaughter them relatively easily to sort of mid difficulty, right, would obviously show their strength, and at the age they were at would show how effective an early Vaal boost can be, even though we did see the evidence of that immediately when it came to Hanjiro, when he fought the other members of the code heads, right? But it would also allow us to look at their characters, right? So in this idea, I imagine Roberto and Meledan already have a sort of rivalry going on, right? And you can even see them like sort of trying to do a competition where they are both trying to take out a certain number of members, you know, and then whoever takes them out the most wins, right? Something along those lines, right? And then we look at his second line right here: "Protecting that pathetic girl of yours has made you soft," right? So if they have a sort of more intense rivalry, we could see the beginning of Roberto and Ariel's relationship in the massacre as well. Let's just say that they're all fighting. Meledan and Roberto take out, you know, 1, 2, 3 members back to back, while Ariel is sort of having a little bit more difficulty. And then she gets snuck up on, right? And she almost gets taken out. But Roberto is the one who saves her. And with that, we could see the fostering of their initial relationship, right? Unless, you know, you want to do it to where they were already in a semi-relationship at that point. But I think the sort of seed planting is a little bit better as a pre-established relationship, even when they were young, in my opinion. But it doesn't really matter, right? And of course, him saving her would lead to this sort of comment making sense at this point in time, since we saw the beginning of it in the past, right? Outside of that, the only other thing you could do with like Meledan, Ariel, and Roberto with a massacre is seeing how their talents were when they were much younger, right? Of course, we didn't get a chance to see Roberto's full shift in action, but we do see what it looks like. And we even see him fight at a base. So we could even see Roberto lose his arm in the massacre, right? Since we know his right arm is fully mechanical and has that magnetic property with his ring blade, we could see that take place where he loses his arm, and maybe he even sacrifices it to protect Ariel, right? Showing that relationship and that connection as well. I think it would be really good if we saw how strong they were as kids with their talents, but how weak, in a sense, or how lower level their skill with their talents actually is at that time. So yes, they are able to fight strong Kimyos and really skilled humans with the skill that they have, but they aren't even really close to the actual limit in full mastery that they should have at about this point in time, right? It's hard to gauge their chi levels at that time, right? But if they're above the god tier by this point in time and have more chi than them. Before then, they should have probably like a max of about the lower end of the pillar tier, right? Or maybe they're about, if you want to do specific ranks, you could do 50 to like 75, right? And considering Kagaya was only rank, 102, if they're above his rank in terms of just like chi, they should be able to easily deal with some of the even stronger Kimyos in the clan outside of like somebody like Masato, right? And then we have, of course, Nico, who can only really teleport people out and get them to safety, who has no real combat and actual chi expression to combat them, right? So I think the Gakki being present at the Massacre does a lot for scaling, does a lot for them as characters, and of course, like I said, it looks at Vaal and Masato as well. So I think, you know, Meledan and Roberto interacting in a sort of way, and then it leads to a connection between Roberto and Ariel. I think that's just really good for all three of those characters. Of course, like I said earlier, you could have Goro be here as well, since even if the stronger Kimyos can deal with Goro the same way Andrea could, they can't kill him, so it doesn't really matter. At some point, he would get a sort of advantage over them, and he has a definitive advantage because he can increase the weight of their weapons, and they should all be using katanas, right? Which is just bad. So now they're de-weaponed, they're de-armed, and if they're not a Kimyo with a sort of high destructive talent, there's nothing they're going to be able to do against him. But again, they can't kill him anyway, so it doesn't really matter in the long run, right? Now, I think the only other Gakki you would want to have present is the Beast Gakki. We don't know his name, but I think this would be a good point in time to reveal that if we're not going to do it anytime sooner, if it's not going to like make any other appearances. I think that would be a really good time to reveal his name. I think the Beast Gakki being here is really good. I know I mentioned scaling, but it also adds to his point right here where he says, "I've dreamed of experiencing a fight to the death," right? So this statement should mean that up until this point, every fight he's actually had hasn't truly put his life on the line. And the only other time that would have happened before he like says this would be here or during, you know, potentially his involvement in the massacre. However, I think you could use the massacre as a way to introduce the concept of him wanting a fight to the death, right? Like, let's say they all planned on taking Roberto, Ariel, and Meledan, and he was deciding who else to take. Somebody like the Beast Gakki would sort of almost plead to want to go because of his desire to fight to the death. And depending on his age, it would make a lot of sense for him to go, yes, I want to go because I want to experience what it's like to put my life on the line. This sort of concept would also, or can also, look at why each of them as individuals are happy to help Vaal or see what it's truly like to aid Vaal. So when we get to, you know, events like season 2 and, you know, this interaction, it makes sense to why they're just so comfortable doing what they're going to do, right? But again, I think this past visual could look like the Beast Gakki desiring to have a fight to the death. He gets to the destination, right? Kagaya brings them all there, and everybody he faces is just weaker than him. And it leaves a sort of bitter taste in his mouth because this is supposed to be the strongest clan out there. And his father, Kagaya, a higher commanding officer, and his siblings are dealing with everybody around them with ease. So I could definitely see this sort of planting that initial seed and then it being a sort of like saddening thing for him. And it would add credence to this later statement right here where he initially attempted to fight with his life on the line, but it didn't end up like that. And then every point after that, he was already stronger than everybody else outside of the other Gakki. So then this statement makes more sense because now he's going to fight a god tier who is his direct enemy, right? Because if Vaal has all of the Gakki training to try and actually master their talents, there's no way that he would be outright okay with any one of them distinctly dying from training, right? In my opinion, I don't think that properly fits, right? Especially because each of them has a distinct purpose, like he says in, I think it's the end of season 1, but he also says it, and I think definitively in season 2. So he just should not be outright okay with any of them dying during a sort of training, especially if he sees them as his children. He's not going to be okay with any of his kids dying before they get to fulfill their purpose, which is how I see Vaal's character, and I feel like that makes a lot of sense, right? And with that being said, if the Beast Gakki never gets a chance to actually feel that that moment where his life is actually on the line during training. The only other time he may feel that is during a mission, right? And if the only real time he's been on a mission is during the Heart Clan Massacre, and when he was about to fight Minamoto, the Heart Clan Massacre would be the first seed of that, and then the Minamoto fight would be the second time it occurs. Yet and still, he didn't actually get a chance to fight Minamoto, but this would be the definitive time he gets a chance to fight with his life on the line, because in my head, I see all of the Gakki, Vaal, and Kagaya just clearing and running through all the Heart Clan members, which would lead a bitter taste in the Beast Gakki's mouth and have him sort of upset that the strongest clan, due to his own talent and a Vaal boost, essentially amounted to no real challenge, right? I feel like when looking at what we have for those characters, that's the best thing you could do with each of them as individuals. If we had a little bit more insight on even the Poison Gakki, or no, not the Poison Gakki, the Corrosion Gakki, or if we had a better timeline for when Kagaya acquired Goro, or if we even had just designs and even minor inklings of the other 3 Gakki, which should be, I think, Death, Puppet, and Sand Gakki, I would also include them in this little concept, but since they haven't been shown and we only have literal black silhouettes of them, I just can't include them, right? But I think these 4 do just enough for us to get a better understanding of why they act the way they do with one another, why they have said the things that they've said up until this point. And then, of course, you could also do a deeper dive on why they are okay with, helping Vaal and why they're happy about it, essentially. Because I don't really think there are other moments outside of maybe us seeing moments, I guess, prior to them helping Vaal for us doing that, right? But essentially, to kill multiple birds with one stone, you could just have them all be present at the massacre and then just take little inkling and little moments to look at each and every one of them, or to at least these 4, and then, give them proper understanding for what they have said later on, which just adds to their character. And I bet essentially it's only beneficial and it doesn't take away from anything that we have for them up until this point, especially because we don't know these niggas, bro. We hardly know the god tier, but the Gakki are even more mysterious, right? So I feel like this sort of idea it benefits the story in such a grand way that the only other way you could really do Gakki characterization is through very, very specific backstories, right? I could see a sort of interaction with the Beast Gakki and his clan, since he is from a clan. I could see something like that. Let's just say they all went to the Oduzo clan and sort of slaughtered everybody, but kept the Beast Gakki alive because he was the only one who was willing to join his forces. I could also see that sort of thing. However, you could still then go further and then give the Beast Gakki that same sort of inkling of wanting to fight to his death during the Heart Clan Massacre, right? And that would just lead into this interaction right here, right? If we're not going to see the other 3 Gakki, I guess, before their official fights, I think this idea would basically just help show their initial designs before we see them later, right? I also think it would be a good idea to show, if we're going to have the other 3 Gakki be present as well, I also think it'd be a good idea to show, like I said with the others, to show their talents at a base level. At this moment, you wouldn't have to give them descriptions, and then when we see them actually in their official fights later on, then we can get their descriptions, right? Then we can see the full capacity of what their talents can do, right? So I've heard, I don't remember where it was said, I think it might have been on the Discord, and I think I might have used it in a review, but I know Brent said that the Puppet Gakki is gonna fight the puppet users from Naruto. And if that's true, I can see that character essentially using multiple Heart Clan members to fight each other, right? That's a perfect visual. And then that doesn't really do too much for the talent, as we can just see how it works on a base level, and then later on we can see the grown up and more individualized aspects of it when they fight who they're supposed to fight, right? Or the grander technique that came about, maybe even from them participating in the massacre, right? Now with the Sand Gakki, I don't really have anything for that nigga. And then the Death Gakki, also nothing. But these are perfect ways to introduce characters that you're gonna have to introduce anyway, and that you're gonna have to expand on anyway. But I truly think that that this concept makes a lot of sense and can do a lot for the characters, right? It can do a lot for the story, and it answers a big question that everybody's had since season 2 in regards to the Heart Clan massacre, right? We're all wondering how it took place, when it took place. You know, of course, we have Masato alive now, so we're wondering, you know, how he lived, what did he do to instruct his family during this time? Like, this sort of thing can answer a lot of questions while also expanding on basically every character involved in it, right? Like, we can have Masato interact with Kagaya, and we can see Kagaya and have him explain on why he's perfectly fine siding with Vaal, or why, you know, he would betray his brother and his father, right? Of course, I already looked at why it makes sense for the Gakki to be there. Again, you can have Kagaya basically run through the entire clan, but like, if a Kimyo who would be ranked higher than him is present, if Black Mask isn't enough and multiple of those Kimyos fight him, he's gonna die, bro. So it makes sense for the Gakki to also be there, far stronger even as children or teenagers, to help whittle down those even stronger Kimyo's numbers, right? Because it says in 113 that the Heart Clan was given an abundance of power. Like, let's just say more often than not, or maybe like a 50-50 chance of like a Kimyo being born into the Heart Clan has the same level, or can be of the same level of strength as a clan head of another clan, right? So these are Kimyos who would basically, if they showed up in a different clan, be able to almost take the clan head's position in terms of just pure strength, right? And I feel like that's kind of fair for what the Heart Clan is supposed to be in terms of strength. And, you know, of course, I think the statement obviously corroborates that as well. And then we have Kagaya potentially fighting these individuals, and if he's not going to use Black Masks, since it seems like they all sort of forbid it, then he has to just use Rage Mask and teleportation to kind of and snap back and forth between those to really fend off everybody. But if everybody else has, you know, proper reaction speeds, proper teamwork, like even in season 1, it seemed like if Kagaya didn't teleport, even a weaker Anton and Shay were gonna one-tap him, or at least damage him relatively significantly, right? But if stronger Kimyos who have similar levels of teamwork, especially if they can react to Kagaya teleportation, the nigga's gonna die, bro. So it just only makes sense for the Gakki to also be there, given a blood boost, seeing their talents used at a base level, but showing how strong they actually were even as children or as teenagers, bro, to see how strong they actually are in comparison to strong Kimyos. I also think this would do something really good for like the ranking system, because we don't have a lot of ranked members in Ordeal in proper showcases, right? So what you could do is you could have Kimyos from like level 51 to like honestly 100 or like 97, or in my personal opinion, I think like 75 is the really good number. You could have like 2 or 3 named Heart Clan Kimyo members and have them fight each of the Gakki as children, right? Or as teenagers. And we see each of the Gakki kill them. And that would really show how strong they are from a ranked standpoint as well. Because if the ranking system is based on strength up until a certain point when we get to the God tier, it would really show like, oh, okay, like even as youngins, these guys were already on that upper echelon of strength, right? And now that they're adults, it makes a lot more sense why they are not just contenders for the God tier, why they are above them, because of how much chi they would have gained over the time through training, practice, and Vaal's blood boost, right? I'm not saying all of my ideas are perfect, but if I've ever had a perfect idea for Ordeal, I think this is one of them. Genuinely speaking, this is probably one of the most proper and one of the only things I would basically beg Brent to actually add into the story. If we're all asking for more character depth, more character knowledge, if we all want to know what happened during the massacre, you can do a lot of things with this idea, right? It hits a lot of points, and I feel like it only makes sense, right? I feel like I try to say a lot of things that just make sense, but out of a lot of things I've said, I think this makes some of the most sense ever. It feels perfect, basically, right?
I want to touch on something that Jay said. He said, speaking of the Gakki, how would y'all feel about the younger version of the Gakki present during the Heart Clan massacre?
I would love it.
Nigga, I would fucking love that shit. It gotta be like 2 or 3 of them from a young age that was there to actually see all this shit, and those 2 or 3, it has to be some form of elitism in the rankings of the Gakki. And if it was a handful of them there, like, bro, that shit'd be so cold. I would be so hyped for those handful of guys Gakki, and it's kind of what I was alluding to when I was just talking about like they need some sort of status or something. Just them niggas being there, being able to witness that, and possibly whether it's in the moment they get influenced or later on in life some shit go on to where like that became their influence would be some of that. That's exactly what I'm looking for. That's exactly what the fuck I'm looking for. You said that in a past stream. I think that's a phenomenal idea. Shout out, Jay. Yeah, that's a good one.
The one person I would say needs to be there, and maybe this is just my personal bias, I can at least say that, but I would love if the Oduzo clan Gakki was there. Because if he already has, or is using a forbidden aspect of his clan's talent, then seeing him watch the other Heart clan adhere to their principles and their morals while still being massacred will be a perfect parallel between how he views his clan and how he views that clan, but also how he internalizes his strength. Even if he's at a younger age, that memory being burned into him at that young age will make it more impactful when we see him ultimately fight, because he's the only Gakki that got 2 seasons worth of hype. And we even see him restricted when he pulled up with Thanatos because he didn't have his brother with him. It's crazy that his brother's that giant ass dog, but he didn't have his brother with him. The first time we see him, his brother fought to physical capacity, and we only seen his healing factor come into play. And we know all Kimyos have natural healing factors, so we didn't even really get to see his brother's talent be on display for real. So I would think that'll be a fire way to give that character a little bit more nuance than the rest of the Gakki. Because right now, Roberto is the biggest disappointment. Can't even lie to you.